it means parts or things that come together to be called government. Do you understand it? Things that come together to be called government. In this regard, today we're going to learn what come together to be called government. All right. So here we have to start with the framework of the state, the framework of the state. All right. So here we're going to start with the framework of the state, understanding how power is distributed and exercised within a government structure. In the first place, last week we talked about the government, right? So what is the difference between a government and a president? Who can help us? What is the difference between government and president? All right, so Mr. Mumin Al Yassin, I saw your hand first.
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. I hope my dear Smith and instructor
Thank you.
as well, by the grace of Allah.
Thank you.
And difference between government and president is the president is the head of a state.
Good.
He has the authority in the whole country. He has authority. He has and the government. And government is formed by the authority in some countries to parliament and the minister. They they are less competent president. This is what I understand from my perspective. I said, sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mumin. And I like the fact that you were able to distinguish between a government and a president. In a nutshell, a government, just like the president, can be changed. For example, we have what we call the ruling government, those who are in power, and do we have what we call the outgoing government, the government that is, moving. But whoever is in charge of the state, the day-to-day affairs of the state and everything is called the government. Everyone is actually part of the government. But then the president is the leader of government. Thank you very much. So let's continue. I will be calling you out one after the other as we progress because of time. Now, the next we're going to start with is we're going to talk about the principles of separation of powers. What is the separation of power? In politics, anytime you hear the word separation of powers, then we have to take our mind back to what power is. Power is what we call the absolute control that is in the hand of an entity, especially a government or a legitimate leadership. Now, when we say separation of powers, it means within the organs of government, we should have kind of a mechanism to separate or to distinguish who does what. For example, Mr. Al-Mumin is a minister, and I am an MP, that is a member of parliament. What are his roles or what are his responsibilities as a person who is in charge of a ministerial position, and what are mine as someone who makes laws? Do you understand it? Therefore, we should be able to give everyone their roles, and we should be able to make sure that someone is not doing someone else's job. So if I am an MP or member of parliament, then Mr. Al-Mumin shouldn't be able to enter or intrude. There's a word in English we call intrude, means to be able to get into my shoes or into my position and do what I'm supposed to do without my permission or without any lawful backing. Therefore, that is what we call separation of powers. Now, this is the principle. It has principle of, we have all called the principle of separation of power. Then the principle is what? Preventing tyranny. Preventing what? Tyranny. What is tyranny? Tyranny is having too much power and using it anyhow to your advantage and to the disadvantage of the people. For example, I am the president of Ghana. I am the president of Ghana and I'm given a lot of powers. For example, I can decide to choose people to work for me and fire them. I can decide to make the whole people of the country sleep at 6 o'clock in the evening, and no one can change me and no one can stand against me. Then I have absolute power. Then I become a tyrant. I'm doing things to please my ego, but to hurt the ego of the people. Therefore, um, that is what we call tyrants. Do you understand it? Like someone who is tyrant does that. So tyranny is the act of, you know, seizing all absolute powers and using them maliciously to that disadvantage of the people. So here we can talk about the liaisons that we'll call the dangerous liaisons. That is by Sergio and Woods in 2017, and they emphasize that political theories have highlighted that horizontal separation into distinct branches is essential to safeguard individual liberty. Why do we need separation of power? We need it um, to distinct or to distinguish the responsibilities of people or people in power so that people will be free in, doing what they are supposed to do. And the second one is what? Functioning or functional distribution. That is it ensures that no single entity has absolute authority. Do you get it? So, for example, we all know what is happening in Myanmar. You guys know what the general who supervised the murder and massacre of the good people of Rohingyas. We all know what happened. Now he is the leader of the country and he has a lot of power and he has succeeded in giving the military a lot of power. Of course, it has been like that in the government of Myanmar for a very long time. But you know what happened to the leader, the president who supervised the murder of a lot of Rohingyas? She's in prison. I think she's going to be in prison for the next 27 years or something. And the one who did her bidding is the one ruling the country right now. That is why this is a typical example of what we mean by tyranny. He has a lot of power. Though the International Court of Crime is looking for him, countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, so many countries have, you know, called for his arrest, and many countries have barred him from entering their countries, but he's still the ruler of the country who is exercising absolute power to the disadvantage of the beautiful people of Rohingya. Do you understand it? So just look at how someone like him rule the country. How would he ensure that the people of Rohingya are given what they need to be given? Of course, he wouldn't do that because he himself is a murderer, he's a killer, and he is a, a very big criminal of politics. Now, let's move to the next one. So that's it. That is the two things is that one, we don't want to produce what we call tyranny by making people do other people's job or people abstracting other people's job. And two, we don't want to give one person or one a group of people absolute power. And that is what we call the functional distribution. Now, so now we're talking about organs of government. So what is it at all? Now we're going to look at it. What are the organs of the government or the organs of, government? So now we're going to look at it. So the first one is what? Legislature. Legislature. When we talk about legislature, what comes to your mind? Legislature talks about making law. Look at the word legislature. That is, there is law and there is writing of law or making of law in this word. So here, those part of the government that deal with the laws that govern the state are what we call the legislature. So this include what? The member of parliament. They make laws. They go to the parliament and they say and they argue and they do so many things just so they make what is used to rule the country. So we call them the legislature. The legislature, don't forget them. And who give the legislature the power to make laws? You and I. You and I, Mohammed Kashim, Mohammed Rahim, Muhammad Ali Hassan, and everyone here, all of you are part of the people who give power to these people. That is why I've always told people, I've always said in my classes that be careful who you choose to represent you. During elections, what do you guys do? What do we do? The one who gives you an amount of money that is big for you becomes your candidate. But that shouldn't be the case. Are you selling your own conscience? Are you selling your own freedom? Are you selling your own power to someone who has given you something very small, something very little that you cannot even, use for a very long time? That is something you can just, spend in 1 or 2 days. Shouldn't be what you exchange for your own development. So choose wisely. So usually my students ask me, but sir, how do we do that? I'm the only person, the rest would take money and vote. So if I don't take any money, how am I going to, get what I want when other people are going to vote, nevertheless? I'll be like, I usually tell them that it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have done the right thing, and that becomes your emblem. And in the next session, people are going to learn from you, and gradually, everyone is going to come back to their senses and vote wisely. I've always told you guys, I think in my previous lessons with you, that if wise people neglect politics, if they neglect politics and they say, oh, I'm not interested in politics, I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to choose any kind of leader for myself, then foolish people are going to come together and choose a president for you. And the president's power is going to be binding. What does it mean? It means it doesn't matter whether you think that government is legitimate or not. What matters is that that government is going to rule you willy-nilly, whether you like it or not. So please choose the people who represent you wisely. And at this stage of your lives, it is very, very important to involve yourself in politics. Start organizing your own people. I'm not asking you to organize them militarily. No, I'm not asking you to get them arms. I'm not asking you to get your people, accoutrements to fight and all. No, no. Organize them, organize their ideas, engage them, and educate them in terms of how they choose the people who lead them. So you can start from the camps. You can start from the camps. Don't choose people who are only money conscious. Choose people who are development oriented. Don't choose people who are only money oriented or who are always thinking about money. They are money conscious. Everything about them is money. Choose people who are development oriented. That is to say, their thinking, their movement, their thought, and everything is geared towards developing you and the camps and the people in that place. So if you find someone, maybe let's say Mohammed Amin is very, articulate and is very, hardworking. He does so many things to make sure that people are very good, are happy in the camp. Anytime he wants to, represent you guys in the camp as your leader, vote him because leadership starts from the camp. Don't be surprised that the next leaders of Rohingyans or Myanmar in the near future would be produced from these camps. You guys think they are nothing. This is a very good spot to start politics, not politics of insult, not politics of, denigration, not politics of fight, but politics of pure conscientism, politics of deliberate development. So that is what I can tell you about legislature, because the people you choose to represent you make the laws. So they make sure that citizens are made laws. Now, the next one is the executive. The executive is the one that implement what the legislature does. So the executive are the people who enforce the law. According to the law, every citizen should go to school. So if anyone doesn't go to school, people responsible for punishing them, people responsible for making sure that they really go to school are what we call the executive body of the government. So they manage the daily affairs. So these are the president, the ministers, the police, and the rest that we have. We call them the executive body. Now, we have the next one, and that is the judiciary. What is the judiciary? The judiciary are, you can see the word judiciary. You can find a word like judge from it, right? So they are the people who settle disputes. They administer justice. So we're talking about the court, the judges, and every person or all people that, ensure that people get, justice in the courts are part of the judiciary. So, for example, if I did something very bad to Mr. Mohammed Hakel, then I am going to be sued by him. I'm going to be taken to the court. And when he takes me to the court, I'll be given the chance to hire a lawyer. And if I'm not able to hire a lawyer, the state has the responsibility of giving me a lawyer. The only problem is that states usually do not give a lot of money to these lawyers that represent you at court. Therefore, um, your safety or whatever is not guaranteed because such lawyers do not fight for you rigorously. Of course, these lawyers are interested in taking a lot of money. All right, so let's move to the next one. So we're starting with the legislature. The legislature or the legislative branch is what we call the voice of the people. This is just a kind of a thing, but then we will be brushing through quickly because I've done many of the explanation here. So first is lawmaking. They make law, and there is another word for saying making law. We have what we call the enacting laws. Then we have what we call the representation of the act on behalf of the constituents. What is a constituent? The constituent is a small part of a country. So we have the state, we have regions, we have counties, and we have what we call the constituents, like parts of the state or part of the society that come together to form a state in a whole. We call it what? Constituents. So then we there are also representation. They act on behalf of the constituent, and we also have an oversight. They make sure that they monitor the um, the executive branch to ensure that laws are implemented. And they also have the financial control. They authorize the government budget and taxes. So they, when a new tax is going to be introduced, it has to be debated in the parliament before it is introduced. And when a government makes its own budget, it's supposed to be taken to the law court, no, sorry, the parliament, and read, debated before it is implemented. So decisions made in legislative branch are undeniably important, and that is what Cambridge University Press says to 2024. Decisions made in legislative branch are undeniably important. So it means it is very important. Now, the executive also does the following. So they enforce the law, like I said before, and they manage all civil servant state bureaucracy. They also do the diplomacy. For example, the foreign minister of the state, the foreign minister of a state, engages with other foreign ministers or other state apparatus in other countries to ensure the continuity of diplomacy. And they also make sure that defense, that is, for example, the commander-in-chief of the country or armed forces in every country is the president. That is to say, if the president orders all the military, personnel to attack or to defend, then they do it without any hesitation. All right. So the other one is what we call the judicial branch. We already talk about it. We say that they interpret the law. Like if there is something about the meaning of a certain uh, article of the constitution, there was in a constitution, or if there is a kind of an argument in, or misunderstanding in the meaning of a certain law, then they have the the power to tell us what it really means because they know law. They are the custodians of law. All right. So here they do what we call the interpretation, and that is what they are known for. So let's look at the functions and principles of the judiciary. And they do what we call the adjudications and interpretation, and they do what we call the judicial independence. For example, if I am the president of the country, it doesn't mean that I can just order a judge to rule in my favor. So if I become the president of Ghana, it doesn't mean that I'll just go to the court and, force the judges to rule on my orders, like to do what exactly what um, I want, except if what I'm trying to do is lawful. For example, if someone kills another person and I ask the judge or I ask a certain court to produce the perpetrators of the murder, of course, that is my job. My job is to ask them to do that. But to ask them to find someone guilty, especially if that person is not guilty, then that is what obstruction and intrusion. Therefore, It is not warranted and must be discouraged. All right. So here, there is something we call the checks and balances. Checks and balances, ensuring equilibrium within the government structure. So what is equilibrium? Equilibrium is what? Who can help us with the word equilibrium? Yeah. This word is used in physics a lot. Not physics, sorry, in chemistry, if any of you remember. Do you have any physics teacher here? Do you have any physics teacher? Do you have any physics teacher? Sofia Kodor.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mr. Mohammed Yasir, do you want to help us?
So actually, equilibrium means is balance or stability, where different processes or their influences are equal and no side has too much power. That's all.
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think this is rather used in physics more than in chemistry. Now, thank you very much. So that's it. Checks and balances. If you give powers to one entity or to an entity, then the entity is going to what? Is going to do what they want. It's like they're going to see the powers of other people in the name of what? Exercising their own powers. Therefore, it is okay that we set a kind of mechanism to make sure that we check every organ of the government. For example, legislature, the legislative check is that we can impeach executive order officers. So those who make the law, for example, if you guys have heard before, um, in the United States, there have been attempts several times to impeach. It means to remove from power a certain, you know, president or a certain executive officer. So if any executive officer does what is not right, then the legislature or the legislative body has that kind of, power to debate over it, to do so many things to make sure that he's removed from power. So the legislative can impeach officers and reject judicial appointment. So if, let's say, for example, in the news in Ghana yesterday, the president of Ghana has nominated 3 judges to the Supreme Court. And what this one means is that they are going to go through the legislative debate and everything. And they are going to be vetted. And if they are deemed qualified, then they will ascend the Supreme Court officers. But then if they fail, then the legislature will be like, no, we don't want to. And the executive check here, they can also veto legislation passed by the parliament and appoint judges to the judiciary. So the executive bodies, for example, the president, like what I told you, chooses who he wants to, be in the law court. But then they have to go through the legislature to okay them before they start their work. And the legislative or the judicial checks is also done when judicial review is done to declare acts of legislature or executive unconstitutional. For example, the judges that are selected to be in the court can also decide to strike something. For example, you can see the case in the United States where Donald Trump tried to cancel what we call the birthright. For example, if you travel to the United States and you have a child there, according to Trump, that child shouldn't be given the citizenship of the United States. But a court, a competent court of jurisdiction, quashed it, said no. Trump is not right about that. But then Trump is the president, but the judicial body that he has the power in selecting is saying no to him. So let's restart the session and try to complete what we have already started, because the link is going to finish very soon. All right. So let's meet in the next session. Of course, we just have a few minutes. In the next session, I'm going to take your questions before we close.